In 1989, I was living in Leipzig in East Germany as a peace activist and singer-songwriter as part of the oppositional movement. When I was a student at high school, I started being observed by the Stasi, the Socialist Secret Service of the GDR, because of my oppositional writings of poems and songs and so on. Since '87, I started being a member of a circle of oppositional dissidents around the Protestant main cathedral in the center of Leipzig, St. Nikolai Church. In the beginning of the 80s, they started something that we called Friedensgebete, peace prayers. And this was once a week, and it was kind of political prayer against this logic of the Cold War.
What many East Germans seem to object to is not socialism as such, but the cramped authoritarian version that has been thrust upon them. A frustration summed up in the contrast between Mikhail Gorbachev, youngish and dynamic, and Erich Honecker, his elderly host. In the centre of East Berlin at the weekend, just as in Leipzig, Dresden and elsewhere, another dissenting view was being articulated. The demonstrators and the new political groups formed a la Poland and Hungary are calling for democracy and free elections.
Everybody was in fear of a civil war, and nobody could imagine what follows then. Will the Russians interfere? Is this the beginning of a new war between East and West? Because we thought if there would be a civil war in Leipzig, maybe the West had to react. When I went to church on that afternoon to do the preparations for the peace prayer, I could see that already thousands and 10,000 of people filled the whole center of Leipzig. I could see families with little children, with grandmothers, old people and so on. And I really asked myself, what will happen to them if we really will have a violent conflict that day? But when the church door closed for the prayer, we could only hear that something was going on outside. So we could hear people shout, we could hear the sirens of police cars and so on. And when the doors opened at the end of this peace prayer, we couldn't go out because the city was so crowded, everybody was waiting outside, that there was no space for the people to go out. Nobody in this situation wanted to give the order to shoot. Why? There's only one answer, because we were too many in the streets. They were prepared to arrest maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people. More than 70,000 people, some experts say 120,000 people, came to Leipzig, stood in the streets and said, okay, troops, if necessary, shoot us, but your name is People's Army, your name is People's Police, and we are the people. At the end of this evening, you could not really see a conflict line anymore. It was really a party atmosphere. I remember people sitting in and on the roof of a police car, having a cigarette together with the policeman and giving light to each other. Everything would follow after that. 1 month later, the wall came down. A few months later, we had the very first free elections in East Germany. Nearly exactly 1 year later, we had the reunification of Germany. Was a consequence of that moment, the moment when the decision was made, this conflict will end peacefully.